Hello. Today we are going to be looking at ecosystems. And really simply, our only goal for today is that you should be able to describe an ecosystem by the end of all of this. So let's get into it. Here we go. First off, ecosystems, what you need to understand is what components they're made of. Simply put, it's a community of organisms, because remember, ecosystems contain both biotic and then also the abiotic components of the environment. So we have still the combination of abiotic and biotic factors. All of those things have to interact as a system. And that's what separates out an ecosystem from a biome. Now we're looking at how all the biotic factors and the abiotic factors interact. And if those factors are not actually interacting with each other, they are not part of the same system, which means they are not part of the same ecosystem. So looking at it as it works, what specifically is a system? A system is parts that all have to be interacting, each part impacting the other parts. If one factor has no impact on other factors, then they're not part of the same system. For example, my phone has certain parts that work on the inside of it. It has a microprocessor, it has different sensors, it has different parts within its casing, it has a battery that all impact how it works, how it functions. The way it functions is not directly related to how my TV functions or how my computer functions. They are separate systems. Their parts aren't necessarily interacting with each other. Now, those parts were to interact, then they would all be part of the same system. So if I had a smart TV that could connect to the internet, then all of a sudden things can change. But looking at this, so systems all have to be interconnected. Every part has to impact the other parts. And that makes up the abiotic factors, and the biotic factors of an ecosystem must all be interrelated. So if we were to look at this salamander on the side, a few things that you should know. First, it was actually born underneath of a log, and that is its adult stage. And this type of salamander doesn't actually have a larval or a tadpole stage. So part of its ecosystem is not the water bodies that are nearby, because this amphibian doesn't actually interact with ponds or interact with rivers or streams or creeks. So this particular salamander's ecosystem is different than another type of salamander's ecosystem that would require reproduction in either a pond, river, lake, stream, creek, whatever. So that is something to be considering when we're looking at the ecosystems for our organisms. Ecosystems, by and large, are specific to the organisms that you're looking at. It depends on what factors are impacting that specific organism. So different organisms have different ecosystems even within the same biome. Here you can clearly see that water, as it flows downhill along this path, and has caused erosion to occur, and this is going to favor some organisms, help them to thrive, and disfavor other organisms, making it much harder for them to exist in this particular location within this biome. Again, that is all part of an ecosystem. The certain aspects that these organisms have to deal with based upon where they are and the areas that they particularly are going to be impacted with. It's not every area of the biome that matters. It's only the particular habitat which they exist in and the different factors that are going to impact their life, both the abiotic and the biotic. So out here in this temperate deciduous forest biome, different parts are going to interact in different ways, and it's the parts that are interacting that are part of the same ecosystem. An organism that moves in and will interact with this tree is going to impact it. Organisms that never come in contact to this tree, or organisms that never have an impact upon this tree, aren't part of its ecosystem. And the abiotic factors that don't actually impact this tree are also not part of its particular ecosystem. The deer that would be in my front yard almost every single morning have a completely different ecosystem than this salamander. This salamander has a much smaller range. It has a much smaller ecosystem than the deer. They cross many different yards. They will eat from many different areas. They will go miles in range, which is all part of their ecosystem. All of those different places that they go have different factors which are going to impact the deer and which they impact themselves. They are going to cause different plant species to thrive, and they will cause other plant species to not do nearly as well because they end up being food for the deer. So these different organisms have a completely different ecosystem, even though they all both occupy the same biome. And even though their ranges overlap, that does mean that their specific ecosystems are going to be different. So in summary, look, ecosystems, they are interaction specific. The organisms must be interacting with both the biotic and the abiotic factors. If there's no interaction, then they are not part of the same system, and thus they are not part of the same ecosystem. Now, that doesn't mean that the interaction has to be a direct interaction. It doesn't mean that the tree has to specifically provide something directly to the tree. But if the tree impacts another organism with it, which impacts the deer, they are part of the same ecosystem. So we must remember, this doesn't have to be a direct interaction. It can also be an indirect interaction. The key is that there is an impact upon these species in some fashion. And remember, it's made up of both the abiotic and the biotic factors. So both the living factors and the non-living factors within our environment are all going to be part of our ecosystem. That's it for this time. Be awesome. Stay awesome.